Now, Kenya is geographically and strategically important for China. Is this China's opportunity to capitalise on Trump's disruptive trade policies?
Thanks for having me, Sally. I think you're absolutely spot on in saying that this is a vital time for a deepening and strengthening of China-Kenya relations, partly due to the global dynamic, in particular the disruption caused by the Trump administration. So certainly China and Kenya have a long relationship of friendship and cooperation. But I think it's also important to point out that Kenya plays a vital role in this part of the world, in East Africa, as a cornerstone member of the East Africa community. And, just one quick thing to share here. We look at Nairobi being the base for two major UN agencies, I think, which shows the importance of Kenya. And when we look at the East African community, about 300 million people, almost the size of the United States, with a much younger population, that the cooperation, the deeper strategic cooperation between China and Kenya will have ramifications not just for Kenya, but for this part of the world, and I think a global impact as well.
Interestingly, though, Ruto had a West-leaning and even, anti-China rhetoric in his presidential bid. Does this visit by the Kenyan president represent a strategic shift in Nairobi's alliances moving forward?
Well, I think this Ruto doctrine actually is rooted in pragmatism. So if we look at President William Ruto's background, he has a scientific background and agricultural background. And I think in this way, similar to the Chinese leadership in that it's very results-based, meritocratic, not wed to rigid ideological dogma. And, again, if Kenya follows through on this with increasing infrastructure investment, and in particular integration into an East Africa community, perhaps to an East African Union with a single currency, a single president, cooperation with China, not just for infrastructure investment and expertise, but actually advice, expertise in building institutions and strengthening governance will be vital. So I think certainly President Ruto's trip to China at this time represents an important strategic shift for Kenya and Africa as well.
How is Beijing now positioning itself when it comes to trade? We know that China is seeking to build a global South alliance to counter these intense tariffs of Donald Trump's. But, China being the flag bearer of international trade now, what will it take to keep global trade flowing without the United States at this point?
Well, Ajay Banta, the president of the World Bank, who was formerly president of MasterCard, made a very important comment in this regard. And he said that actually, when we look at the growth of global trade, the U.S., of course, is a very important market. But a very significant driver, I think something like more than 20% of the increase in global trade over the last 20 years is intra-regional trade in the developing world. And his estimate is that if there's greater intra-regional trade integration, African GDP could grow by more than 25%. And I think here China can play a vital role, not just with market access to China, but again, the key is building effective institutions and stronger governance. And I think many around the world, especially in the global South, now look to China, not just as an island of stability in this very chaotic global trade environment, but I think China's demonstrated resolve in facing these challenges, and this has earned it admiration from many countries around the world.
And of course, Ruto is using this time to seek new investment in Kenya, including for various infrastructure projects. And he's seeking to do this under a public and private model rather than through giant loans. Can you talk a little bit about the two approaches and what China can gain from a public-private partnership with Kenya?
Well, I think this is a very important point, Sally. China's approach to working with the global South has been based on this principle or this philosophy of win-win. Another way to phrase this is that it must be sustainable economically as well as environmentally. And we look at public-private partnerships, I think, as a very pragmatic manifestation of that. If we think of development as just aid, giving money, that's been shown to be a very ineffective model that has been championed by the West. Whereas I think China's approach has been it has to deliver measurable, tangible economic gains in a sustainable way, and these gains need to be equitably distributed. That this, in a way, public-private partnerships are I think, really a great manifestation of this approach.
All right, Andy Mok, we'll leave it there. Really appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you, Sally.